Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of my podcast. And as everyone knows, I'm delighted to have my many different guests. And hello if you're watching on YouTube. And today is no different in terms of having an awesome guest on. Today we have the brilliant Dominic Ayres, marketing lead with Eversheds. And Dominic is now a published author. I need to have a fanfare kind of thing going on. Don't know why I did that. That's the first time I've ever done that. That's not embarrassing. He has written the book, How to Advance Your Career in Professional Services Marketing. Now, those of you that know me know my career spans 10 plus years within professional services across marketing and BD. Dominic is no different to me, although he's way above my pay grade in terms of intellect because he is an author and I'm not. Dominic, an absolute pleasure to have you here. I always kind of start off with the kind of the who, the what, the why, the how, the when, the where. Let's start there and let's see where this takes us.
Excellent. Well, thanks for having me on the show, Alex. I've always been a big fan of the show on Spotify on my school run commutes, particularly last year in the pandemic. So, I mean, I never set out to write this book, and it's something that actually I always hoped that someone would beat me to it. And Alex, alongside other experts, have contributed to this book. As part of putting together a book, I wanted to reach out to CMOs, director of BDs and experts across the professional service industry, because in my own career journey, I was always curious as to, what skills, what behaviors, what things will help you be a success in your career. So similar to yourself, Alex, I've only ever worked for law firms. I fell into this career. I would have thought I would have taken on a marketing role in a far more interesting organization like a football club. But it wasn't until I did a placement year at DLA Piper, and I was just really fascinated with the opportunity to work in such a business that is working with sophisticated clients. It kind of dictates what's happening in the economy, and the opportunity in the marketing team to do really challenging marketing and kind of client development. And I think, on your kind of marketing renaissance, what's really, really fascinating is the Renaissance period's never really kind of had a rule book. It continually evolved as individuals or the world evolved with it. And I think in writing the book, although I looked for this book 10 years ago, it probably would be a very different book to what it is now. And I think what's really clear is none of us had a rule book when we worked in the industry, and I was really keen to start to create and kind of commoditize what are some of the things you need to be doing in your role as a marketing function. And I think that is continually changing. And I think we've talked at length around, particularly the last 12 months, how we are writing that rule book, kind of like the Renaissance period, things such as webinars, how we work from home, how we interact with clients. We could probably do a whole session on the metaverse, which I know you've recently invested in a headset. I mean, that's an area that I've had 5 clients, manufacturing clients, talk to me about over the last week alone. What does that mean for their business? And we're not even thinking about that yet in legal. I wonder what your thoughts are with your VR headset yet.
Well, before we get kind of sidetracked into the metaverse, I think I think it's brilliant that you've written the book, because again, if I reflect on my career, I kind of fell into professional services as well, starting out at PwC before moving into legal with Berman Leighton Paisner as was, and then commercial real estate with Jones Lang LaSalle. And you're right, there wasn't a rule book per se or a guide in terms of this is how you do things in a BD and marketing capacity. Because I always say to people, unless you've worked in professional services, it's very hard to explain the complexity, the nuances, the politics, should I suggest, that happens within professional services. Because fundamentally, depending on how many partners you have in the partnership, they're a business in their own right, with their own agendas, their own vision, their own goals, their own personality. So it's very unlike, dare I say, in a corporate, where you have that pyramid, the person at the top's in charge, and then the rules are the rules, and those are dissipated through to the business. And if I recall, on the very first piece of advice I was given at PwC by the then the then London chairman, he said to me, there are two things I want you to do or not want you to do within the first 12 months. Don't piss off my partners and don't piss off the secretaries or the EAs. Because if you do that, then we have a problem. If you don't do that, you'll be kind of plain sailing. So why do we feel that it's just there are so many different, I guess, routes to market, if you will, internally within a professional service firm, to marketing and or BD?
Yeah, I mean, I think, what's really interesting is you say, most of us that have studied a marketing degree, such as myself, is, we did the 7Ps, the product. In a B2B business, such as a professional service firm, the partner is that product on the shelf. And each product is very unique from the next partner. So it means that, there's endless possibilities as to how you customize that, and particularly where the market's moving to. And in any industry, from a marketing perspective, how the customer experience and the personalization, every customer wants a unique, product. They want it to be fit for their purposes. And that leads endless opportunities, for you as the marketeer. And to your point around, stakeholder management, and I think we all ring to that kind of tree about don't piss people off. The challenge we have now, and kind of the renaissance and kind of that rise as us as the marketeer, is how we have more authority. We turn to more in the organization for growth. Particularly in the pandemic, the marketing function one of the most heavily utilized, if we look at kind of a law firm. And part of that is we are seen as the experts in client development, in terms of how do we market the firm, how do we talk to clients. And that's really interesting because that's the only power we have in the organization. So the partners we talk of, they own the business. They have that hierarchy authority. If they tell us to do something, rightly or wrongly, we generally will say yes to. But if we ask them to do something, we have no authority. We have no absolute power unless we can speak to their motivations. But one of the things I took away from recently doing an MBA was something called domain power and domain expertise. And if we're seen as the expert, whether it's something, digital marketing, how do we put on a client event? How do we write content? How do we create that unique experience? Our partners will buy into what we can do and how we can be useful, and that will kind of generate our rise in the organization. So it's something that I talk a lot in the book is, we should each year think about what skills do we need to learn about, what things do we need to know. One of the things I did as part of writing the book was ask people like you, what should I buy this Christmas that I should be reading on my nightstand to prepare me for the year ahead? And I think you gave me 3 recommendations. So my wife was really concerned when I asked for 10 books for Christmas. It was a really boring Christmas present. But, I think that shows that if I don't read those things and I don't invest in myself, this is something I touched quite a lot in the book, is how do you invest in yourself and upskill yourself? In the same way that lawyers have to learn new legislation, new laws, the marketing team have that responsibility also to learn those things that then they position their firm for the future.
You raise a really interesting point, which I want to come to, because I have a view on that, should we say, having spent the last 5 years or so as an independent consultant, kind of the outsider coming in. But before we kind of go there and maybe kind of build on this theme around the Renaissance, for anybody listening, either in role or thinking about moving into role within, the marketing or BD function within a law firm, within professional services more broadly, because I do feel that what you talk about is relevant in accounting, and we're also relevant in commercial real estate, because they're very similar. They're nuanced, but very similar beasts. What are the kind of the main themes that run through your book that anybody's listening can kind of get a sense? Okay, yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. I need to get the books, obviously, to build on that.
Sure. So I think one of the key themes, and it's something that actually the book actually set out to write in the first place. It didn't plan to be a career book. One of the key things I kind of seen quite a lot of, particularly execs and those junior professionals coming in, was that kind of strategic thinking. And what I mean by that is, how do you think about what you're doing? And if we go back to that Renaissance theme, most of the people, when they think about the Renaissance, they think of the artists, Michelangelo, Da Vinci, and those. And what was really clear about those is they were seen as experts in art and design. And sometimes the marketing team can get lost in that kind of internal brand for the partners will say, jazz up my document. Oh, could you proofread this 200-page for leadership report? But actually, what those kind of famous people in time, I'm not comparing us conventional marketers to those famous people because that sounds egotistical, but I'm just going along with the theme. They were also scientists. They would actually think about how what I do in my role impacts society or impacts the firm if we take that context. So whenever we think about when we market things and actually how do we identify trends that our clients are happening that then helps our firm position, that's something we need to do in our role. So the book has a whole chapter focusing on that big picture thinking. How do you become more client facing? That's something I've always found I've done the best marketing if I have access to the client.
Yeah.
And before I launch anything, I'll talk to the client and say, will you actually find this useful? Am I wasting my time? Is this being done in a vacuum? And I never had the confidence early in my career to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I think now I encourage more junior people to do, to get as much access, build your connections with the end audience, because then you know what the client wants. Whereas traditionally, the partner would tell you what you need to be doing.
Yeah.
So I think that's a key theme, is how do you think more strategically and slow down and read the game and think about what you do actually contributes to your firm. I think the other bit is the team element. So I talk quite a lot about working as a team. The marketing function, sometimes we're our own worst enemy. We work in silos. We don't seek to understand outside of that's not my job.
Yeah.
We don't collaborate. But if we look at the last 12 months, what was really successful in the pandemic was a lot of firms refocused what they were doing as a team, and the team came together and won together. We had one focus campaign, it was COVID, and we were the most efficient we had ever been. Everyone worked together, everyone did a team effort. You see when other people were struggling. If we were to operate like that for anything, then anything would be achievable, and we would be a lot more in tune and responsive to our client needs. So that team element and that stuff, and I guess something that never changes, but it's key to us doing the role, is how do you manage the stakeholders? How do you actually work with them? And I think that's really important. If I take myself, for instance, I work within a large industrial group where I have 100+ partners. Mm-hmm. Any of those are a stakeholder.
Yeah.
So how do you manage their needs against the kind of wider strategy? And this is something that I always felt like you needed to be senior in a role to have that confidence to manage people. But actually, there's a lot of things you can do, such as how you pilot ideas. How do you get that buy-in or champions into that? So that's something I talk quite a lot with. And you asked for free, so I'm going to cheat here. But the one thing that the book turned into was how do you proactively manage your career? And that's the main kind of last chapter, is how do you reflect on where you are in your career? Are you happy? Are you being pushed? Are you achieving what you want? And that's something I think I drifted through my career quite a bit when I was in the early stages, and I just went where the firm went. And if there was a promotion, I would achieve it. If there was a move to another firm, I'd achieve it. But I never really sat down and thought, does anyone know me outside of my firm? Am I building my brand? Am I aware of what the next step is? And going back to that skill gap, do I know what things I need to learn and build in my career? So I think there are a few things that I took away from writing the book and reflecting on in my own career, but actually I thought that was something that came through when I spoke to yourself included and others, that people do really well in their career. They kind of got those elements and things to focus on.
There's a lot there that I want to kind of build on. I think that if we go back to your point around being client facing, which I agree, I think is absolutely key. Now we know that's still not that prevalent in the legal sector. It's getting better. If I reflect way back when I was moving out of recruitment, so 10+ years ago, and one of the reasons I interviewed a few firms, and one of the reasons I joined Berman Leighton Paisner way back when, reporting into Dominic Ayres and ultimately Ash Coleman Smith, was fundamentally it was client facing, and they said, we want you in front of our clients, and the partnership had bought into that, whereas other firms it was no, this is a very inward facing role, and your market is inward. And that, to your point, gives you it enables you to get, in my view, credible with the partners quicker, because you can start to maybe bring insight they weren't necessarily aware of, and I reflect on it. It reminds me of a story when we were. It was an insurance client, and they wanted us to pitch or something, and it was in. I can't remember what it was. I can't remember exactly what it was for, but then an invitation came to fly over to Germany to meet the procurement team, category managers they call themselves, and I responded, copying all on the partner, going, yeah, we're just going to hold fire as to whether we're going to come over, because I thought, what's the point in a partner spending best part of their day, if not longer, for an hour meeting with procurement when we could probably do it over the in this environment over the phone. About half an hour later, I get a phone call from Ash going, "What the bloody hell have you done in terms of this? This partner's been on us." All I did was respond to an email and said, "Can we come back to you?" rather than "We're going to do it." And the partner then responded, going, "Well, of course we're going to come over and this and that." Well, okay, fine, okay, cool. And then I remember sitting down in in the planning meeting, and the first thing he says to me, "So, what's a category manager?" And I went, "Well, it's procurement." "Why are we going to Germany to meet procurement?" "Well." That's the reason I kind of put a hold in, and we can discuss it. But now you've committed to get on an aeroplane to then go and have this meeting. It was probably not going to be a good use of your time. But interestingly, from that point onwards, I then had the best relationship with that partner
Yep.
because he understood where I fitted into the whole kind of client partner dynamic in terms of the relationship. So for me, that is, I think you hit the nail on the head there, and it's good to hear that the firms are promoting that, because I think without that you can't really truly get under the skin of what's actually going on. To the most part, my experience is actually some of the clients were happy to meet you in terms of the non-lawyer inverted commas, and just have broader conversations on the second part. And I guess this kind of all goes into promoting your career around you investing in yourself. And this goes, I think, for any role, any type of career you're in, and kind of reading books and wanting to learn what's out there. I'm going to make a bold statement here. I don't think much of that goes on. It's again, it's a brilliant thing that you've written this book, because I feel I experienced this myself. It's fundamentally why I moved firms, because of the frustration, is that you can just bumble along in your career in marketing, get paid handsomely compared to other marketing roles outside of professional services. You do your job, you go home, happy days. Why do you believe that is, in terms of the career path of kind of marketing and BD in professional services?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point. I mean, when I reflect on, like, we look at family or people's careers as you're growing up, it is that kind of culture. You had 9 to 5 role, when you finish the day job, log off, and that's it. Your mind might still be racing, but you finish.
Mm-hmm.
I think now the market is so competitive for roles, and people are a lot more conscious of how they use their time
Yeah.
outside of work. If we take writing a book as an example, it's like, now you can literally do anything with your time
Yeah.
outside of that day job. And if you put it, if there's anything to invest in, that will actually pay dividends to yourself in your lifestyle, and that is, it's probably your career.
Yeah.
um, I think sometimes you can be very, I think it comes back to comfort,
Yeah.
and the last 24 months have probably put everyone out of their comfort
Mm-hmm.
zones. And it gets people reflecting on what was working before. Is that right for me? And I think one of the things before, in most people's career, they only look at 2 things. One is your salary.
Yeah.
If anything changes or impacts that, then it takes attention. Or one is job title.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's all sorts of things such as work-life balance, there's your
Yeah.
mental health, it's the organization as a self. So all those things play that factor into how you plan your career now. And I think, given that there's such a focus on talent and there's so much opportunity in the market, there's recruiters that are looking for 30 odd roles, each of them,
Mm-hmm.
that I see on LinkedIn every day.
Yeah.
um, and there's such a war on talent. And I think last year in the US, we've seen something. I interviewed quite a lot of CMOs, but there's something like 30 CMOs that were appointed into the position, which shows the growing importance of this. So now, to get those opportunities and seize them, you need to be really strategic, really purposeful as to how you plan your career. Because if you just do good work, it comes back to the stakeholder management point I talk quite a lot about. Is, imagine, in a remote world, you're the hardest worker in the possible. You put the most hours in, you're doing everything that's asked you. no one knows you're doing it, they can't see your results and your output and those things, then no one's going to actually consider you for promotion or to progress your career. So I think a lot of it comes back to is now, there's a lot of opportunity. You need to really make sure you're doing something that is in your best interests, and that's not just financially, but actually what your well-being. Like, does it feel like a job or a career? How do you know? And you've probably found this when you've moved roles. There always comes that point where you're like, the work's no longer challenging,
Yeah.
you're not advancing, the firm is not the right fit. Going back to the culture thing, if you're not being able to see or speak to clients, then there's a fundamental problem there. The marketing's done in an isolation.
Yeah.
This is the difference between B2C is always that it's the one industry where you have no touch point with the client.
Yeah. I mean, and again, we touched on what's happened over the last 24 months in terms of, I guess, challenge a lot of the status as across all industries, but I believe so more so in legal, where it couldn't possibly be done this way, and now it can be done this way. I understand the concerns that some partners I've spoken to have had of not having FaceTime with their associates and so on and so forth, but I'm not going to get into that debate on this. And we touched on this again, kind of I joke about having the green room in terms of calling it the Renaissance. And you've already you've picked up on this in terms of what you've been talking about is around. I feel or believe that the industry that is marketing now needs to build on this chance and this opportunity that's been given to kind of, okay, we've proven that we can do things differently. We've kind of shifted maybe the narrative or the perception of what marketing can do when marketing's allowed to do what it could do, in crisis, but in a different way. So it's not you're not just here to jazz up the pitch doc or the cred statements or the debates around whose photos on the thing or not. But again, if we think about, so you touched on people changing career. You touched on the fact that there are 30 CMO roles appointed across the US, and you're right. They seem to be the recruitment consultants that we know every day. I guess my not fear is that, are we just in some cases, because you are unique in terms of the industry, you've written a book, you've written it for others, are we just playing musical chairs in some instances where you're just moving the same to the same, they're just getting paid more money with the same job title, and you're not really going to get that innovation, dare I say, that is required, based on your earlier statement about you've had 5 clients asking you about the metaverse. We're having lots of conversations about the metaverse with our clients, so I've taken it upon myself to invest in a piece of technology so that I can actually talk about it with some authority because I've been there and
you
done
just
it.
secretly wanted a new headset, and you've just justified to the wife this
Exactly.
big expense this month, because I would have done the exact same. My expense is still waiting for approval, is on the family budget.
But I genuinely don't see enough of that. And okay, let's be clear here. I'm really passionate about this industry. It's an industry that's enabled me to get to where I've got to. So this isn't me calling anything out. But if I reflect on my journeys and my travels, when one could travel around the world, and the varying people and firms that I met, certainly at the top, I felt that there were some who didn't necessarily want to have the vision because they knew where they were in their career, dare I say, and everything was kind of working well. Therefore, kind of why upset the apple cart? But you've now spoken to a number of CMOs as part of your research into the book. Hopefully, you're going to tell me that I'm now wrong.
No, I think in part, like anything, there are going to be elements where change won't happen as as quickly as you want. As well as CMOs, I did actually ask the target audience of ours is the senior partners. So I interviewed senior partner Reed Smith, and I actually interviewed Chris Saul, who's the senior partner I worked with at Slaughter and May, and he was he was fantastic. He just got everything that marketing was and how it can help in brand and that stuff. So I think a lot has changed, and I think if I look at why why the role is going to change in the future, and linking it back to metaverse. So if we take everything before the pandemic, I'm going to call that the dark ages. We are now in the Renaissance periods where we are rewriting what marketing is in professional service marketing. And and technology, and I talked about that kind of customer experience. That is what is going to drive the change. And when I talk to a lot of CMOs, that is something that increasingly, it's fine going into the C-suite and then saying we're going to be doing all these things, and marketing are going to be the growth officer for the firm. The challenge is for us to then stay in that space. It's going to be the results and how the data is coming out the other end. So that's where we're going to have to be a lot more accountable. We want this limelight, we want this importance. To stay there, we're going to have to actually follow through with what we're doing. We've got to say this marketing campaign or this activity, this investment here has led to Y, and this is how we've directly linked it to the clients. And somehow, if we get that right, then that will kind of validate that. But I think just going back to technology and what's changed. When I started in the industry, I did a placement year at DLA, and my first 3 months was in the digital team. Now, the digital team then, there was only one digital asset that any firm had, which was website. If we look at how that's changed over 10-year periods as to what falls on a digital team, if a law firm has a digital team, at Eversheds we do have one, and that means the different things. But I remember when I was there, I was 19 years old, and I was the only one that had Facebook because I was at university, and I remember DLA wanted to build a graduate microsite to target young lawyers. They didn't understand Facebook. No one on the marketing team had Facebook because I was the only 19-year-old, and no one else that was under the age of 20 had Facebook. So that was kind of my entry into what digital could have. And I remember we paid some fancy ad agency to build this microsite because they were the experts in that. And I think that's going to leave a lot of room for consultants and that in the industry. But actually, then I think what's really key is how many of us internally in our firms understand our digital marketing offering, but actually what's happening outside of our industry. And I think the challenge is I can't sit here and say in firm X the CMO is going to be on the board, or in firm Y they are. I think whoever can really understand these elements and bring it to their role and is the expert in the organization, that their managing partner, the senior partner, has no idea about this as to how technology, in the same way legal technology, there's someone on the board, a CTO or a CIO who understands that. If you become the expert in that room on growth, how technology will help us get closer to our clients and competitive edge, which is really key because we're in such a competitive market, then I feel that will change in the future, and they will have their place firmly at the table. But there's work to go. It'll come down to individuals, not a sweeping change.
It's really interesting to hear you speak, Dominic, because you're now starting to use language which I wouldn't associate with professional services or someone in your role using that language. So things like the growth officer. So that's you're looking, that sort of narrative is what you would typically see in SaaS tech sales. And the fact that you are making reference to marketing needs to be more accountable based around data and then outcomes that whatever it is that you have done has generated. And actually this is a narrative which is more broadly happening in sales and marketing across all industries, but absolutely in the SaaS tech world is that this disconnect between sales, so BD / in this case the lawyer, and marketing. And the marketing typically is not really accountable for revenue. They worry about how many leads have you created, how many your marketing qualified leads have been generated, how many click-throughs, website visits, all these big numbers, which in isolation are kind of meaningless, but to an uneducated board, it's like, okay, that sounds big, cool, tick, moved on. Back to your point around nobody really understanding Facebook. And we're really starting to see this narrative and this conversation shift, and it reflects on a article I read back in 2017 where the author, who's, forgive me, name, is a lady, Dr. Maria Schaefer, I want to say, but she was citing a lady called Katrina Neal, who's at LinkedIn and now at Microsoft. She cited a tweet she said back then, and it was, and again I paraphrase, something to the effect around any marketer that says "I think" in front of a data-led executive may be asked to leave. Now, that was back in 2017. Here we are, global pandemic in 2022. That is now starting to become a really important topic, is that across everything that we do, it's not just marketing, but we have so much data. It's how are we now using it to inform the next step in that campaign, in that webinar, in that piece of thought leadership, and whatever it might be. Back to your point around, it's going to talk to the customers and go, would you actually like this, rather than doing it in a vacuum, or it's on the whim of a partner because they think it's a good idea, because it's all about them. And then the technology play. And I know I recommended you read Justin Michael's Tech Powered Sales, because again, and this is not unique.
Right.
This is there he is holding up to the screen. This is not unique to professional services. Are we actually getting the best out of the tech stack? So this world, marketing technology or BD technology. Do we truly understand what it could do for us before we blame the system, blame something else, or then buy a new system to stick over the existing system where it could do the same? And that's what Justin refers to as your technology quotient, your TQ, notwithstanding the rate at which the marketing technology landscape is evolving. Yet law firms typically don't like to look outside of industry, even though they say they do, because the first thing they say, oh, well, that's not a law firm, or they wait for someone else to make the first move before anybody else does, then moves it. So again, reflecting on you writing the book, and reflecting on talking to senior leaders, are you getting a sense that there's a shift in the sands around this, in terms of wanting to learn more, needing to learn more?
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna, if we're butchering quotes and who does what, there's a quote in my book where it talks about not using data in your marketing is like driving with your eyes closed, which I really like. But at the same time, going back to your point, there is so much data. We all have access to data. I think there's a challenge sometimes we have as marketers where we can be quite data led. We can say, oh, we've done this campaign and it's led to this amount of engagement, or it's contributed to this. I think the challenge with that sometimes is that actually then that data could wrongly or rightly cause repeat patterns that might not have the same results. I think the data helps you, but there's certain points where your experience and your kind of knowledge and that can then kind of complement it, and that can say, actually, I think this happened because of this or that, rather than saying, oh, that worked, we've got to just keep doing this again. I think going back to your other point around, do we feel we fully understand all the kind of martech out there, and when we do get what we have, do we actually use it? I think the biggest thing that always drives that is culture in the organization. So you touched on law firms never want to be the first. They always ask who else has done that before we've done it. That's kind of a running joke, and I think part of that is the competitive nature of the industry. It is such a saturated market, in that we look at what our peers are doing and then we respond to that. And actually, any of us in marketers should really be looking at other companies like Accenture, Gartner, others. What are they doing? How are they disrupting change? Because those organizations are probably that one step ahead of us in terms of technology, strategic thinking, client-centric experience. So I think that's really important. And I think you could have the best piece of martech if we take the most simple form, a CRM system. If that's an isolated martech platform that doesn't connect to anything else you're doing, it becomes less relevant. At the same time, if your stakeholders or customers are not using it, good data in, good data out, it's just a standalone platform that has no relevance. So I think the key with this whole move is, it needs to be a culture. The culture, and that comes from that kind of strategy. Why are we doing this? How will this tool enable us, to do that strategy? And and actually how do we implement change. And actually one of the people I've recently talked to, ironically you introduced me, even though he's at Eversheds, is our chief transformation officer.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about, how do you get change to happen at the same time? And he uses a really good story as to kind of imagine a runway strip, and you've got all these MarTech projects or all these kind of firm-wide initiatives. Problem is in our firms, we all try to land them at the same time on the same platform.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is then our partners and our stakeholders get so confused as to what they should be doing. Why do they should be following this? What's in the best interest? And sometimes even when we look at our marketing campaign planning in law firms, sometimes there's so many different campaigns. The difference with B2C, and I talked to a lot of people that read the book, you only have one campaign sometimes. It's one product, which is the campaign for the next 12 months.
Yeah.
In a law firm, going back to that partner point, I could have 100 different partners that are my product or campaign for the next 12 months. And we're trying to land it all on the same platform over the same period. So there's a few points there. I think, in terms of MarTech, we should be more openly learning what's around us, and I talk about that kind of that big picture thinking, looking outside of our industry. There's all brands, I'm a marketer, so I'm a geek for TV ads, copy, podcast, radio, where I love like good adverts that kind of, I'm like, I'd buy that, that came across really well, or actually that was just really cool, or that thought leadership report, how they did that was just a bit different. It cut through all the noise on my LinkedIn channel. I actually read that. So I think, those things are really fascinating, but there'll be others that won't pay attention to that, and they'll just keep doing what they're doing. And that stuff. So yeah, I think there's a lot there to be learned. And as you say, your book recommendations definitely give me a lot of thoughts. So maybe you can take some credit from that terminology.
you're always too generous, Dominic, with my influence. I feel with my influence or your guidance in terms of what you've done. You've written the book and not me.
I didn't write it alone though. I mean, like I said, I am the target audience for this book. When I started 10 years ago, I think back, I wrote the book as to what I would tell myself in a time machine. But then actually, I've only taken my career so far, and what I wanted to do was, from Mexico to Asia to the US, is seek out people. And I asked everyone, I said, who do you admire? Who do you think is good? So, to your flattery, there was like at least 3 people I spoke to who said you should speak to Alex and get his thoughts on this. So I think that what was really clear is everyone does certain things really well. Everyone has a different perspective. And I think if there's one thing in that proactive career management you should do is to connect with someone outside of your firm in a different industry. And I'm quite lucky, so I did a marketing degree. So most of my friends are doing far more fun industry stuff like at McDonald's, football clubs, I'm very jealous, and other industries. But in doing so, I listen to them and they tell me what they're doing. Sometimes I'm like, that sounds so boring. You're just doing this one ad campaign or, but sometimes some of the things they do is really client-centric, and there's a lot to be learned. So I think just broadening your perspective on those things is really fascinating. And it's I always have like a notepad on my phone where I just jot ideas down when I talk to people, and I think that's a really good way to just continuously learn.
I think you've raised some great points there. I think what was coming through was around kind of the stakeholder management, the ability to influence internally, the fact that this is it's a shift in culture and culture change. We know that's hard, especially in law firms where lawyers are more on the I rather than the E on the Myers-Briggs side of things. So they're cautious purely by the nature of kind of who they are and what they do for their clients. They have to be they have to be right. But I think again, what you're picking up on that point there around diversity of thought, and this is kind of what Justin touches on within his book, is that maybe get a mix of people, but again reflecting, if you're interested in data, get really good at data and marketing data, right? Just be the expert in marketing data. I think you're raising it at the point to, then you can get that kind of seat at the board, irrespective of how senior you are, because you are the go-to person in terms of you understand it. Then surround yourself, then get somebody who's brilliant at copy, then get somebody who's brilliant at graphic design, maybe, or video, or that style of content, and then you create almost this kind of this team. Back to your earlier point around working as a team. that can work as kind of one unit, if you will, to create the best of something. But then also, in terms of that authority back to the partner. Again, I reflect on my early days at PwC working with young tax professionals who would be fearful of like just knocking on a partner's glass door and walking in. I said, what are two things that can happen? They're going to tell you to piss off and come back, or they're going to have a 5 minute chat with you. And at the end of the day, they are just people like you and me. Don't kind of freak out that just because they're a partner, they're this amazing kind of they're amazing being. And again, that I feel the pandemic has kind of leveled that playing field a lot in terms of seeing behind the veneer that is the corporate suit. But I wholeheartedly agree with you and fully support that kind of diversity of thought. If you're interested in something, get out there and just learn more about it, connect with people outside of your industry. And the good thing about marketing is most of the marketers are happy to connect with you and talk to you and share ideas because we're all living the same pain in some shape
Definitely.
or
There are some
form.
scars, the book surface, like I mean, what was really interesting, another trend I took away from is the whole reason I wrote the book also was one of the things I looked at my own career last year and I had in my New Year's goals is this good timing if anyone's thinking about this is how many people actually know you outside of your organization? And what I mean by that is like, so we tell our partners all the time that I'm an expert in marketing. How many articles have you written on marketing? And I was like, God, I feel a bit like a phony. I did at the start of the year. I was like, I've never wrote an article on what I do. And all I tell my partners all the time to write articles in the press and kind of all this thought leadership. I was like, I've not wrote one article. So I set at the start of the year, I was like, okay, I'm going to go on one podcast. I'm going to speak at one keynote and I'm going to speak on a podcast. Ironically, my keynote was in the metaverse. It was on a platform called Favela where I was an avatar. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, so I think like, I was like, well, that adds credibility because I had a lot of partners going like, I read your article. That's pretty good stuff. I was like, I tell you this all the time.
Yeah.
You've only just listened to me because you read it on LinkedIn. So I was like, that was really good. But I think that's something that I found from the book is that actually when I wrote out to a lot of people, and there was a lot of CMOs I came across, I was like, they've not posted anything on LinkedIn. They're almost like kind of secret agents. There's no digital footprint to them. But then when you got them nailed down, like, why don't you write a book? Why have you not
Yeah.
wrote the book? Or why have you not been on more podcasts? And I
Yeah.
guess it's time and stuff and that kind of, busy day jobs. Last thing you got to do is write an article. But actually, if everyone wrote an article, there'd be so much more of a community
Yeah.
like the legal tech sector, which I'm very jealous of, as we've talked about before. And there'll be people like me when I started 10 years ago who was like desperately searching to read everything and kind of consume everything. And I always like to like know everything and deep dive. Probably my partners get annoyed I ask so many questions. But I think that curiosity mind is really good. But yeah, going back, if there's one thing you could do this year, is think about what you're good at, whether it's, something digitally focused, it could be client centric, it could be your best copywriter, write something for the community, on a platform, go on a podcast, and build your brand. And I think like that's a really, really important thing, because it goes back to your point, the seat at the table. If you can create something of value, and that's all it is, with the senior partners, they want something of value. They want something that's everlasting. It's not just in the moment marketing. It's like a program. It's an innovative idea. It's something that you can bring that will add an edge. And I think anyone, those that I see successful in their careers are those that create something that outlasts them, whether they move to another firm or they create a piece of content and it then becomes the same thing we do for 10 years. That's really important. It comes back to value, and kind of really think about what big things are going to move the dial in my firm. That's the same with your career. And that's also, what the book talks about. How do you think about where you are? And there'll be stuff in the book that people read and are like, I'm doing this already. But it's something that if you've got a specific problem, a setback in your career, there's a chapter on resilience. If you're planning your appraisal, there's a chapter on that. If there's a bit around how do you write articles for press, I talk a bit about how you can build your brand there. So I thought through all my scars and I've spoke to loads of people like yourself included as to what other people have gone through. So hopefully a lot of people will not have to go through as many hard lessons as we have.
And I think that's a brilliant place to bring this to a close. And I wholeheartedly agree with you. in any career, any role, start getting out there and building your brand. Start becoming famous. Start becoming famous in inverted commas. We're not talking about becoming an influencer or influencer marketing. That's the kind of the byproduct of it.
If you're on YouTube, my daughters think you're famous. I remember when I did that first podcast, my kids were on YouTube. They were one morning, and they were watching like Kids Slime, and then they see my face pop up. They're like, "Dad, you're famous. You're on YouTube." That's which is hilarious. And then my daughter's like, "You've wrote a book." And she's like, "What's it about? Is there any princesses or unicorns?" And I'm like, "Nah, you're not going to be reading this book anytime soon."
Well, princesses and unicorns, maybe. And you're going to be famous now on this YouTube channel.
To them, I'm famous, so that's good. Yeah.
But Dominic, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, and again, absolutely, chapeau to you in terms of writing the book. That is no mean feat. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you after listening to this or reading, want to learn more about the book? Where's the best place for them to connect?
Sure. So I'm on LinkedIn and on Twitter as well. And the book is going to be on Amazon. It's launching next Monday. So, or it's launching the 24th of January, depending on when you're listening to this.
Perfect. I will put the links down below in terms of if you're watching it in the body of the podcast. So if you have listened to this, please do mention this podcast when reaching out to Dominic. If you read the book, again, please do mention that to Dominic. Go and buy the book. It's a very good read. Talk about the book online in your community, because I think this topic of conversation is really, really important. As Dominic has said, we've come out of the dark ages and now we're moving into the Renaissance and the light that is upon us. Dominic, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being a guest on the show.
Thank you for having me, Alex. Always a pleasure. I really enjoy chats, and I appreciate we probably could have touched on some of these subjects for about 5 hours and that.
Indeed. And as always, to my listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. If you want to be on this podcast, you know what to do. If you want to recommend anybody to this podcast, you know what to do. You know where to find me. But for now, thank you from me and thank you from Dominic.
Thank you.